Om Samasta Jan Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navadhitamastuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om, everyone.
On one hand, where the scientists tried to give human beings all the comforts of life, and human beings are comfortably very unhappy and sorrowful. At the same time, the rishis' aim was, in fact, to discover the fundamentals and the absolute reality of life. Let's move ahead in that direction.
Vedānta, life and art of living. Why is it called an art? Because it is not cut and dried only of scientific formulas. It requires emotions, it requires love, it requires faith. And faith carries us through everything. Let us continue with our reading ahead. A community or a nation is, we should not forget, constituted of its members, and the strength of a nation or the happiness of the community depends not only upon the material gains or the peculiar pattern of the circumstances in life, but also upon the structure and composition of the individuals themselves. We can, with knowledge of architecture, make easily a perfect blueprint for the most magnificent edifice in the world. But in its construction, unless we are careful of the quality of the bricks used, the edifice will soon entomb all the inhabitants who take shelter within its accommodation. Similarly, the secular plans and the scientific knowledge of this materialistic age are certainly magnificent on paper and in theory, but all of them seem to crumble into nothingness and entomb our happiness when they are put into practice. This has been the repeated experience of our materialistic civilization. History records it. Our own experiences endorse it in no uncertain terms. What can we say except that it is so true, and you can see it really all around us. In fact, as a nice homework, please do this and see how many more examples you can see that scientists have certainly made many things nicer and better in life. But can they say that they have given us any amount of happiness? I think not. Not really. The redemption seems to be in the happy marriage between the secular and the sacred, the scientific and the religious. So far, the scientist, pure and simple, has failed to establish a scheme of living by which man can attain a peaceful and joyous way of existence. Certainly, they've given us comfort and they've made our life easier. But if you say that they have established anything or given us something which will make our lives peaceful and joyous, I think not. The history of man has been a melancholy story of repeated wars and revolutions, all fought in the name of peace. In its sacred name, we have learned to take weapons of destruction and kill each other with ruthless efficiency. The peace that we know of today is but the exhausting, fatiguing, demoralizing pause between two immediate wars. After every spasm of cruelty and bloodshed, the animal in us, in sheer exhaustion, seeks a shelter wherein to mourn or to roll upon itself until it licks its wounds dry and gets ready to fight again. How many times, especially around our own nation, we see other countries showing us their prowess, how powerful they are, how many billions and billions of dollars spent on creating this ammunition for what? So that we destroy each other and in the name of peace. It is really, really so ironic. All the lovely wars and revolutions have not succeeded in discovering that secret prescription for joy or that system of perfect government where each citizen can bloom forth into maximum happiness he is capable of. This failure can directly be traced to the very ignorance in us of the real meaning of life and its component parts. It is forgotten or not realized at all that the external pattern of objects cannot and will not consistently remain long in any given scheme, formulated through the pen, the word, or the sword. The pattern changes eternally, and so do the minds of individuals. In this welter means turbulence, of change, to maintain equilibrium is a utopian dream. Thus, all revolutionary changes for a congenial living pattern are necessarily endeavors doomed to failure, so long as they ignore the subject unit constituted of the mental, the intellectual, and the spiritual personalities of man. Simply put, materialistic objects cannot give us joy and peace. They keep changing, man keeps running behind something which it finds new, something to amuse itself. And not only the object, a man's mind also keeps changing continuously. We have seen the four personalities, and the clash of the four personalities is a constant. Then, is philosophy a dream of despair? If it were so, man would have long ago thrown it overboard and got himself relieved from its severe implications. On the other hand, true philosophy is the most optimistic call to man to act diligently and wisely, carving out for himself from moment to moment a greater state of perfection whereby he can come to live in a fuller world of nobler endeavors, pursuing the more enduring values. The solution which our seers have offered to the world seems to be a call to accomplish this inner revolution. According to them, the true goal of joy can be reached only if the mind and intellect of the individuals are controlled and patterned so as to find for themselves their equipoise in all the changing vicissitudes of life. Never mind how much the world around you is changing, if your mental balance is good, you will be able to deal with everything in great equipoise. They have minutely described the strategies to be followed and the methods to be adopted to achieve this inner transformation. Their aim was, in fact, to discover the fundamental and the absolute reality in life. It took them many a century of minute observation, patient analysis, and laborious recording to discover that an experience consists of three fundamental factors, namely the subject, that is the experiencer, the object, that which is experienced, and the relationship between the object and the subject, that is the experiencing. Where any of these three is absent, an experience cannot come to pass. Just as in the absence of any one of the three components of the atom, it must necessarily disintegrate. How beautifully Gurudev has explained that bond which is so necessary, and it cannot be with any one of them missing. In this combination of the experiencer, the experienced, and the experiencing, it is evident that the secular scientists chose for themselves the field of the experienced, that is, the field of the object.
Objective work.
For their investigation and achievement, while the subtle scientist of life of the rishis took up for their field of inquiry the world of the experiencer, the subject. Thus, the difference between the secular scientist and the rishis lay only in this, that while the former were the seekers of truth, working in the outer field of the material objects, the later chose the inner world of the subjects and through it, all pervading truth. So both wanted to find the truth, but the scientists, the people of science, chose to find it in the objective world, and that truth kept changing also and was never permanent. But the rishis or the sincere scientists, they dwelt inside of the person, inside of the subject, and they experienced the all-pervading truth. These subjective thinkers found in the course of their observations that when a subject, excuse me, that when a subject comes across an object and earns for himself an experience, the experiencer, though he be physically one, becomes a composite structure of four different personalities: the physical, the psychological, the intellectual, and the spiritual.
This we have detailed study.
We have studied in details that this body may appear one, and the senses, when they go outward towards an object, the experience that happens between the subject and the object, the experiencing which is there, it is not just of one body, but it gets disintegrated for the four personalities within us. The various subtle aspects of his reaction make him so. They are so subtle, and at the moment of experiencing, they all work so quickly that the superficial observer fails to recognize the fine distinction in this simultaneous action. Their laborious experiments and exhaustive reports crystallize for us the clear theory that when a subject comes in contact with an object, it does so not as an integrated whole, but with four distinct mouths, as it were, from the four different layers in the person. Four differently constituted entities, each having its own demands and values, rise up at the challenge of every situation created by any object or being and thrust at once to experience it. So the experiencing, at the time of experiencing, all these four personalities, they have their own standards and demands, and they all at one time, as soon as they have seen the object, they rise up to meet according to their requirement.
Could you give an example for connecting it to the day-to-day life example or experience?
Well, Gurudev has already given one, and then let us see if we can connect.
Okay.
Suppose a cake has been offered by your neighbors as a casual present to you. The physical man in you at once jumps up to experience it. The eyes registering its shape, the nose its smell, the skin its touch, and perhaps the tongue as a result also starts watering. The mental man in you also rushes forth to experience it. But it decides that it can enjoy the cake better after a couple of hours since it is not very hungry. Nor is this all. The intellectual faculty in you may also rise up to evaluate the situation, and maybe it will remember the warning of the doctor that the cake is bad for your body since you are a diabetic or perhaps overweight. Further, the sense of the divine, the conception of the truth in you, may create a hesitation in accepting the cake from a neighbor and putting yourself under an acquaintance's obligation. So you can see that just one object keeps the people in four different directions, always a tussle. Thus, at every moment in each of our experiences, now it happens in each of our experiences, four different processes, as it were, protrude from us to suck at the situation and earn a synthetic profit of the experiences. When the four different powers, behaving as unacquainted strangers from different realms, each entertaining different values of life, come together to enjoy any given subject or situation, invariably that which brings satisfaction to one conveys but varying degrees of dissatisfaction to all the other three. Consequently, no situation yet been discovered by an ordinary mortal in whom he can seek and hope to discover a complete satisfaction for all the four in him. How difficult it is. Here we can give a wonderful example, which I think many of us may have experienced. Me and Jagdish have decided to travel from Mumbai to Pune. And our destination is Pune, a temporary destination, going there for a holiday with a friend. We start in the evening at 4 o'clock. And two of our children, let's assume we have these two children sitting behind, one a young boy and another a grown-up daughter. And we get a little late while starting. And instead of starting at 4 o'clock, we begin our journey at 5 o'clock. So as it is, we have missed our schedule. And now the hurry is that we promised the friend, especially Jagdish, that he's going to reach Pune and have a drink or two with his friend over there. So they are waiting over there. And of course, he doesn't drink alcohol, so it will have to be lassi or juice. And that is how we begin our journey. So initially, we are already slightly agitated of being late. And now our trip is started. It is already 5 o'clock. We have to reach before it becomes dark. And the two behind children, of course, with all their energy. On the way, he wants to go to the water world, a park, amusement park over there. So he is pestering all the other three that, yes, I have to go, I have to go, I have to go. The daughter, because of some project she has to give in school, wants to visit the wax museum which has come there. So insist that when we take a break, we have to take it at the museum because it is a question of my studies and that is very important. And the mother is being very practical. Oh, in that hurry, I have not even taken any gifts for our friends over there. And there is a beautiful market which comes over there in Lonavala. I am going to stop by, collect some chicky and maybe some fruits and all that. And I will not go empty-handed. So she has given the ultimatum to the husband that you have to stop over there. So he has to do that. So each one, while traveling in the car,
Same
direction. We have to reach there at a particular time. And each one has its own objective and each one insists on that objective. And the driver, of course, is eagerly waiting to reach his friend and wants to get there on time. And of course, not to get there before it becomes too late. So there is such discontentment within one family. Just like four different personalities are saying four different things, and eventually the journey may be full of tension and not such happiness, which would have started off so beautifully and ended even better to have a wonderful holiday. So for all of us to think, is there a solution to this? Is it possible to get these four personalities in sync and have them synthesize into one good, happy family? Let's find out what are the solutions for this sort of a problem. In this scheme of existence, in this confusion of personalities within ourselves, in this tragic chaos within, man's attempt at peace and tranquility, his endless ambition to gain joy and perfection, his hope to live in smiles and cheers, should necessarily get blasted and push him into the chasm of despair, despondency, dejection, and disquiet. In short, the inner chaos of the personalities in him is unseen cause of all the sorrows of life, called by the familiar term samsara. The sensitive masters of old must have also felt the desperate straits as passages, onto which man is thrown by circumstances, and they soon discovered a method by which man could efficiently and faithfully integrate the four entities in him into one synthetic whole, so that this integrated four-in-one personality may find a conducive happiness in itself, wherein any part in it finds itself in a satisfactory scheme of joy. If a chariot is, I will repeat this again, wherein any part of it finds itself in a satisfactory scheme of joy. If a chariot is drawn by four vicious horses, each in its wild strength, pulling it in a different direction. The unharnessed power will not allow it down the embankment. So too, today, inwardly disintegrated as we are in our pilgrimage of life, we are getting ourselves wrecked on the wayside ditches, progressing nowhere towards our goal. How beautifully he's given an example of four horses and a chariot. Imagine all the four horses want to go in four different directions. So they're all pulling with their maximum horsepower. And of course, the chariot itself is getting broken. We are reaching nowhere. The goal is definitely not achieved. So this is exactly what is happening to most of us in our lives with our four different personalities.
In our lives, in the sense, every moment to moment experience. What is life? A series of experience. And what is experience? The moment the object connects, meets the subject, the thing that is happening between them two is the experience. Means moment to moment we are suffering.
The practical proposition of religion is a theory that propounds how we can train the four in us and make a pleasant joyride through the avenues of our appointed life. The practical suggestions and their exercises recommended by religion contain in their respective ritualistic activities all the known scientific methods by which each one of us can get ourselves fully and completely integrated. The greater the integration, the greater is our freedom from the thraldom of life. Indeed, it would be a consummate achievement if we truly gain a perfect freedom from the external world of ever-changing experiences and discover for ourselves a balance and tranquility that is permanent and unchangeable. Imagine that life where you would be at peace and tranquil at all times. And this is what our rishis have already discovered for us and not only told us about the problems, but given us good solutions that we need to follow.
And it is not like that they tried it for on around 100 people for about 2-3 years and they came to a conclusion. In the book, it is already said for centuries they have analyzed, observed, concluded, meditated, lived,
Experience.
experienced, taught, watched, and then came to a final conclusion.
For generations.
For generation, and not by one, not by two, but an army of rishis.
Over time.
This is why they say it is Vedānta. Anta, end. Veda, knowledge. End of knowledge. That knowledge by which you know all that you have to know. That is what is Vedānta.
Yes. So let us see what they have asked us for technique of development. Let us just start it for today. During their investigations into the structure of the experiencer, the rishis of yore not only discovered that there are four different entities in each experiencer, but also found that every man comes to make a ready sacrifice of the grosser in preference to the subtler in him. This can be illustrated by a simple example. If you are required to make a physical sacrifice for the sake of one who is an acquaintance, you will be loath to make that sacrifice. But if there be a boil or an ulcer on any of your limbs which causes you infinite pain, you would not hesitate to rush to a doctor on his advice, sacrifice that limb through an amputation if need be. When you come to the realm of the intellect, you will find that for the sake of intellectual satisfaction, you may be ready to sacrifice even the body. Of such stuff were the martyrs in history made. Political history has shown that when man is intellectually fired by some convincing ideas, he is prepared to suffer any amount of physical and mental sufferings in order to achieve their objectives. So we have seen that maybe we are not ready to sacrifice for another. But if it comes to our own body, many times we have seen these examples. of people who climb on mountains or who go to jungles, and they may be bitten or get an infection, or while they're climbing the mountains, they get, due to the ice burns and
Gangrene.
cold, they get gangrene. And then they don't hesitate to cut off their own limbs and all that. So the body
The
can
body
be sacrificed
survives.
so that they survive, of course. And then we've also seen, not just at the body level, but at the intellectual level also, there are great people who fight for their ideas. Even at our own country's freedom struggle, we have seen so many people who have done satyagraha, who have done upvas for the sake of their country, who sat there hungry for days. Some of them, in fact, even gained martyrdom doing all of these things for the sake of their ideas. That political will that gives them fire for a higher cause. So they have even not cared for their bodies for the sake of a greater and higher ideal. So many times we also see the soldiers of our country, which we have recently also experienced, that in order to save their country, to save the nation's pride also, they are ready to sacrifice themselves. So the grosser is always given up for the sake of the subtler. Thus, psychological satisfaction is richer than the physical gratification. The subtler the personality, the greater is the satisfaction that is derived by the individual, and while identifying with the subtler in us, we readily get ourselves transcended from the world of the grosser and its joys and sorrows. If this is a scientific fact, then is there any method by which all of us can identify ourselves with the subtlest in us and try to live in the world continuously in that state? We end with such an incredibly beautiful question over there. It's so much to think about. And one of the very nice examples that I can think of also, that when you are young and you are in love, you want to get married also. All of it, quite a lot of it is also physical by nature. But as you grow older and live with each other over time, it is not the physical that is important. It is the mind which get connected. And then intellectual level you get connected. Then your ideas, your thought process are similar also. And then that is how you create a beautiful life for yourself. And this not only in very personal levels, but the same can be applied to many different levels at higher stages also. So that we end with this beautiful question that first of all, are we convinced that the subtler gives us more happiness, more satisfaction? When you feel in your mind is more important than what you feel in your body, what your intellect is convinced of, that is even better than the emotion that you feel. And then we know now what is the subtlest that is there, that Om, that consciousness, that finite. And then isn't it but natural that we want to connect with that particular aspect? So let us take this journey forward tomorrow, and hopefully the net doesn't trouble us.
And tomorrow we have our question answers.
Yes. Tomorrow is Saturday, of course, and we meet at the same time for any question answers. Please do forward them to us. And the journey of Kindle Life we will continue then on Monday. So we say good night with prayers.
Asato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritam gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi.
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.